Welcome. Welcome to our second episode of No Name Podcast. And Dominic, Dominic, he is finishing up his homework. And our agreement was homework first and then podcast. I think that's a good golden rule. And I am so excited to welcome and introduce Mr. Martin.
Well, thank you.
For you to join me as my very first guest.
Second guest. You had your son on first.
That's true.
That's true. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. Very first, not my son guest.
There you go.
And it just is so special to me that you are the first guest on the show.
Well, thanks.
After Dominic. And first of all, my dad's name is Martin.
Mm-hmm.
And then Dominic's middle name is also Martin.
Oh, really?
He has lots of names. We're Armenian, so we have piles of names.
Uh-huh.
But one of his names is also Martin. So I've always liked seeing your name on the screen and learning how to read by, you don't know this.
No.
But when my family and I moved to the United States, years after I started learning, ESL, and years later when I started learning English, reading was so challenging for me. So the closed captioning was always on. And we didn't have many channels. Actually, I think we only had like channel 13 and whatever other one would catch on the little clicker thing. Right. I don't remember what it was. It was like the other boring channel. Uh-huh. We didn't have cable. And so every evening I would follow along. I had no idea what you were saying, but I would follow along with the closed captioning and just read and try to keep up, but there's always a delay.
Right.
So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
You helped me in my literacy journey and you don't even know it.
No.
And when you came in today, I told you, I don't think we ever met in person.
No, I've been following you for years and all your community activities and stuff, but we've never really met before.
Yes.
Yeah.
Never met you in person because at news time, I always was either watching the news or at home.
Mm-hmm. And
I was joking, but I'm serious. I feel so bad for you every time you would report that you'd have to say my name. Yeah. And it would be hard for me to say it too.
That was always kind of a joke at the station because every time your name would come up, I go, somebody else has got to read this. So,
yes, yeah. I know. My name is like, what's the game? Hot potato.
Yeah.
People are just like, how do you say it? How do you say it? I am so shocked when someone says my name right. I get like, I get really nervous. So like maybe that's my mom or something. Uh-huh. That's the only person that can say my name right.
Right.
So don't feel bad about it.
Okay.
I would be really weirded out if it was pronounced correctly. But it is Liyah.
Liyah,
and,
that's right.
Babayan, and I'm just really glad to have a conversation with you and get to know you. And I think that a lot of people who you're a staple in the living rooms, in the kitchen, wherever people have TVs and they're on, and they just have grown up or grown with you being the face of the community, especially face of the news. Mm-hmm. And we don't know you. We don't get to know you. Well, personally, the ones that do know you, probably they know you. But personally, the majority of the people are like, who is Joe Martin? How interesting. So, where would you like to start?
Well, wherever you want to start. It's up to you.
I love hearing, well, I told you a little bit about my background. Right. My family and I, we were brought here as refugees to Twin Falls through the resettlement program. Mm-hmm. And I've had so many different textures and versions of life and in a short amount of time, and living in the former Soviet Union and then moving and living here in the West, it sometimes feels surreal that in one lifetime that so many different complexities and the world has stacked and collapsed and shifted into so many different directions. And for you, I imagine being on the end of where that's happening in your reporting, you have such a legacy. But where I would like to start is tell me a little bit about your upbringing, your childhood.
I was born in Nebraska, in a little town in Nebraska, Grand Island, Nebraska. Grew up on a farm-ish, sort of. It was out in the country. My dad always he had an orchard, and he'd like to do stuff like that. And spent my childhood fishing and just outdoors the whole time. But I always knew what I wanted to be. I remember as a kid setting up in my room a fake TV station. I'd put a cardboard box, pretend that was a camera, and I always knew that was what I wanted to do, which always irritated my wife because she said, you always knew what you wanted to do. She said, I never knew what I wanted to do, but I always knew what I wanted to do. From there, went to school and the whole bit, got drafted. Vietnam was going on at that time, and I got drafted, and a really low number I had, and didn't really want to go into the Army. And my dad had been in the Navy during World War II, so I decided to join the Navy for 4 years. So I joined the Navy and spent 4 years in Corpus Christi, Texas. I worked at a naval air station there. In that time, I got married to my high school sweetheart, who we'd been dating since high school, and we got married there. And after that, we got out of the Navy, moved back to Grand Island, and at that time, I got a job at a radio station in a town that was south of Grand Island in Hastings, and I drove back and forth and worked. I worked the late shift and did that for a while, and then an opening came up at the TV station in town, KHAS TV, and I got a job there as an anchor, and I anchored the noon news and stuff like that, and was soon promoted to news director. So I was there for years and years and years, and then kind of got the urge to move. So I was kind of looking around, and there was a job opening in KLEW in Lewiston, Idaho. Applied for that, did an interview via VHS tape, which is kind of because we couldn't communicate. They didn't have FaceTime and stuff like that back then.
So it was like an audition?
Yeah, kind of an audition. He sent me some questions. I answered the questions on a VHS tape and then sent it back to him. Got the job there. So at that time, we had bought an old church, and we had converted it into a house. And it was quite a deal, big deal in the town and the whole bit. But I got this job, so I went up to Lewiston. My wife was with our 5 boys that we had. And they ended up selling the church and the whole bit, and then moving to Lewiston. And we actually lived in Clarkston, which was across the river. Worked there for quite a while. It was with a group called Retlaw Television, and they owned KIMA in Yakima, KEPR in Tri-Cities, and KLEW in Lewiston. And Retlaw is Walter spelled backwards because it was Walt Disney's wife that started this particular company. So I worked there for quite a while in Lewiston, and an opening came up at KEPR in Tri-Cities. Got hired there as their news director anchor, and worked there for 3 or 4 years. And left there and went to work at KAYU in Spokane, Washington, as an executive producer and anchor, and worked there for a while until the opening came up here in Twin Falls. Got the job here and have been here ever since. So I was there at KLEW for 24 and a half years. So.
And that was here at Twin for 23 and a half years.
Yeah.
So you said that's such an incredible journey.
It's KMBT, not
KMBT,
KLEW.
yes.
Yeah.
It's such an incredible journey. And to know that you already knew that when you were, how old were you when you first had this
pretty young.
TV bug, or was it radio? Which one excited you more?
Radio at first, but then I kind of started thinking that, TV is probably the way to go because, radio was, just radio. All they had back then was AM, FM, and, there was no Sirius radio. There was none of that stuff. There was no streaming. There was nothing. So it was just the radio. And I thought about that for a while. And I did a little bit of radio before I went into television, and I didn't really like it that much. So I found television was more, and I was more interested in news than anything else.
And was it someone you saw on TV, or what was it? Someone in the family, or how did you get inspired at such a young age?
I really don't know. I mean, back at that time, there was, for all the older folks out there, Huntley and Brinkley on NBC that I watched a lot. Walter Cronkite, which I watched a lot. And those types of people kind of spurred me on. Tom Brokaw. I mean, and they were all old school journalists. And I consider myself an old school journalist. You report the facts. You don't try to go to one side or the other, not like you get on cable news, because every cable news channel has an agenda, in my opinion, where they push their particular viewpoint. My thinking, and a lot of people call it old school thinking, is you just report the news. You stay on the middle of the fence. You don't try to give one side more credence than the other side. So you report the news and let the viewer make their own decision from there.
I believe that is the trust,
right,
and the bond that, with you call it old school, but right. I believe that traditional classical journalism or reporting is the trust and the bond that so many miss, and so many also feel is missing even in our democratic process.
Right.
And I shared a little bit about my background, and back in the Soviet Union, and even now in a lot of the former Soviet republics, and even in Russia now, and even Armenia, the republic I'm from, there's state media.
Right.
And, there's independent and alternative news, but there's predominantly state media. And so much of our information comes from the anchors, and so much of our information comes from the news and newspapers, that to have that trust and that bond that it is facts, and that the people can decide on their own, and the people can formulate their own thoughts and apply their values, right, and their lived values, is so necessary for a free society. It's one of those things that I think a lot of people don't really value, and don't really know it's missing until it is.
Well, a lot of people don't realize the way it was. But when I got into the business, there were 3 television networks: ABC, NBC, and CBS. And that was it. Mm-hmm. And you had your local newspapers, and you had your local radio stations that had news. And most radio stations don't even do news anymore. Newspapers are going away, unfortunately. There are so many ways to get information now, but what do you believe? I mean, you get on the internet, you can find what you want to find, and you can believe that, and getting back to the old school thing, you have to, like Tom Brokaw or Walter Cronkite, you could believe them. They didn't have an agenda. They were reporting on what was going on, and that's always the way I felt. You give the news, whether you didn't like it personally, but you couldn't convey that across. You had to just report, these are the facts, and let the viewer decide. And now, with the advent of social media and all that, it's really hard for people to make up their minds to find the absolute truth. And you said you've got state media back, in the old Soviet Union. It's hard for people to find out what's true and what isn't.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you to move your mic just a little bit, because if I don't, then my tech guy later will say, "Why didn't you say?" I'm kidding. Yes. And I heard what you said, and the word that came to mind is there is such a responsibility,
right,
on that delivery. There is because that is the front line of a free society, is information. and the viewer who is a citizen. The strongest civic participation can take place when there is an informed citizen.
Right.
And for that to be skewed, diluted, or replaced with entertainment, I think is a very dangerous symptom of democracy weakening.
Yeah, well, it gets down to it's all about money. I mean, if a certain entity is not making money delivering the product that they want, they'll change that. The corporations will change that, and which is unfortunate.
I always wondered, and I'm glad you brought up money, because I'm also a business owner. I'm a small business owner, so I have a very small budget for marketing. So I have to get creative.
Right.
But I've always wondered, just thinking about the businesses we have and seeing the commercials that we have, I always wondered, how do we in our community support having a news station? Or, and I don't know the business of it, or does that get subsidized? Or how, is there enough commercials? Because I will see so many ads and I'm thinking, I'm doing the numbers and I'm thinking, that can't possibly cover operations and payroll and overhead and all these other things I don't even know that goes into the cost of it. Because I know the average price of commercials and like prime time or when you're rotating your ads, because I used to also purchase ads. But I was thinking, like, how does that even sustain? Because less and less people are buying commercials.
It's a good question, and I never really got involved in the sales side of the aspect of the business because I always stayed on the news side. And so as far as sales was concerned, I was always happy when the newscasts were full of local commercials. So I can't really answer your question. I don't know. Okay. Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough. I also wanted to ask a follow-up question. When do you think, I'm in my 40s, so I think about how news and television and internet, when that intersected and merged. But when do you think the news started shifting roles in our culture, in the bigger culture?
Well, I remember exactly. I was working at KHAS-TV in Hastings, Nebraska. That's when CNN first came out. And I remember getting asked by a local newspaper there whether I thought that would have any effect on the news product we were delivering. And at the time I said no, because CNN was a cable news network that was covering international and national type stories. And it didn't really affect. But since then, you've got Fox News, you've got MSNBC, you've got a station out of Chicago that used to be WLS, but they do like Prime News or something like that. There's a lot of outlets out there right now where people can get their news. But bottom line is, though, I still think people want their local news. You can get the national or international news anywhere. But what's going on in your town, you have to be able to get locally. And unfortunately, I kind of see that going away. I mean, not just here in Twin Falls, but all over the country. I mean, I see more places consolidating and, spinning things off. So,
and as they consolidate, I'm thinking, I'm just comparing with like newspapers where there's more of the AP that just trickles down. What's the equivalent of that? Is it just pulling from syndicate stations or pulling from just national and
and just filling up things
and regurgitating the same and why wouldn't there be a focus on keeping those separate or having some national but really amplifying the local? Why wouldn't that be the interest?
Well, you would think so, and that's what all these local stations around the country have to do. They have to remain local, and it's, like I said, it's a business. So, if they're making money doing that, that's fine. If they're not making money, then what other options do they have, So it's really hard for people to get, especially, and I really hate to see it because I always, years ago, liked to start my morning off with a cup of coffee, and I would read the Omaha World Herald would come out, and every morning I would read that, and in other towns that I lived in, they would have a morning paper, and I would read that before I would go to work. But you don't see that anymore. It's unfortunate the newspapers have kind of just disappeared because people can get the same information off of the internet. But there's something to be said about having that paper on the desk in front of you or on the table in front of you with maybe a cup of coffee or a glass of juice or something there to read that in the morning, and instead of looking at your phone and reading it. And it's a whole different experience in my opinion. So,
well, my question is, where does someone who reported the news for decades get their news?
It's a good question. I have a couple apps on my phone that I like to. And there's an app called Flipboard that you can pick what you want to see, and I do that, and I get a lot of the news I want off of that. And I've got a couple news apps, CBS and ABC and MSNBC and CNN that I look at a lot, and so that's basically where I get a lot of my news.
What is it called?
Flipboard, I believe.
I should write it down. Flipboard. I have not heard of this app. And my other question about news, I won't ask just news questions, is is who is your favorite, I'm going to go with a live anchor. Who's someone that you like to listen and the way they form questions and articulate? Well,
my favorite has always been Tom Brokaw. I've always liked Tom Brokaw. And he's a Nebraska boy. He grew up in Omaha, started his career in Omaha. And I've met him a couple times. I had to go to a promotion thing in New York City, and I had got a chance to meet him there. And then I did meet him once at an airport in Washington, D.C. But he's always been kind of who I modeled the way I wanted to be off of him, so.
That's so nice that you got to meet him.
Yeah.
That's. I feel like I'm having a Tom Brokaw moment now because I get to meet one of my favorite anchor people growing up with. So thank you for that. You mentioned fishing. I like to also fish. And what kind of fish do you like to catch? Just
anything that'll bite, to be quite honest. Yeah, we took a trip back to Nebraska to visit my mom earlier this year. And on where they live, there's a lake behind their house. And I took my son and his two daughters with us. And we had a great time out there. And we were catching all kinds of catfish and bass and
Do you
stuff
eat
like
them?
that. No, actually, we take them, catch and release. So, yeah.
Yeah. And you have 14 grandchildren.
Yep.
That's so cool that you have 14 grandchildren. And did they know that you're on TV and did they watch you?
Oh, yeah. They all knew. Yeah.
I bet that's a really unique experience for them, too.
It kind of got to be old. Grandpa was always on TV, so it was no big deal to them.
Any of them want to follow your footsteps?
My son is. So, but the other ones, they're all still pretty.
Where does your son do news or broadcast news?
He worked at KMBT. He's no longer there. He's going to be starting up here real soon with a station out of Boise. So,
who's your son?
Joey Martin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know why I did not put that together, and it seemed maybe everybody else did, and I'm the last one. So, okay, good to know. Okay, let's see. And you were mentioning that in Beverly. Beverly, she doesn't get to do what she wants to do.
Oh, she does. She gets to do what she wants to do. Yeah. But she was always, because I always knew what I wanted to do, and she never really had an idea of. She tried lots of different things, and she's always really good at everything she does. So, but she had always kind of irritated her because she always knew what I wanted to do. So,
yeah. I think that you're probably one of the first people I've met who, at a very young age, knew they wanted to broadcast the news.
Yeah, I did.
Which is pretty incredible. Maybe you were a news broadcaster in your past life.
Could very well have been.
And it just felt very familiar to your spirit. And you just had that like, what they say, bit by like the media bug or whatever. But that's pretty incredible. I wanted to get to know, what are you up to now? I know you were mentioning it's been 6 months today
6
or
months.
tomorrow.
6 months tomorrow, yeah.
And I know that a lot of people just wondered, where did you go and why you disappeared?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've done some traveling. Like I said, we went back to Nebraska. We went down to Arizona to visit family. Got another trip coming up to Washington in a couple of weeks. But we've been doing some traveling. We've been doing some stuff around the house. Been doing a lot of reading. Done some fishing. Just been kind of taking it easy. So.
What are you reading that's very interesting?
There's an author I'm reading now. His name's D.D. Black. And he writes these mystery series that are centered in Washington State. And some of it's San Juan Islands and stuff like that. And it's pretty good. He's a pretty good author. So.
And like political mystery?
No, they're just regular old mysteries, whodunit type of things. So. Very
cool. What else do you like to do when you're not fishing, when it's going to be cold here and snowing?
I like to listen to a lot of music. I take walks and listen to music.
What's your favorite genre?
It used to be the 70s. Okay. But I've kind of grown out of that, and I've got Sirius Radio in my car, and my son uses the car a lot. So I listen to some of this new music, and I like Billie Eilish. I listen to that. What's the other one?
Do you like her new album?
Actually,
Birds of a Feather?
Yeah, actually, I was listening to that coming over here tonight.
Really?
Yeah.
We were playing it in here earlier. I'm amazed that you're listening to Birds of a Feather by Billie Eilish, but it is beautiful music.
It is a good song,
It's composed, her and her brother mostly, I don't know if you know this, but it's her and her brother that mostly do the composition, and her vocals are incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very beautiful music, and as much as I try to stay away from pop, that's an art. She's an artist, and that quality of music and melody is something that I continue to play on repeat over and over again. And
Teddy Swims is another really good artist who I listen to a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. We play it in here. We play it over at, a lot of my clients get exposed to at Ooh La La. I'm pointing this way because this way is Ooh La La. Yeah. But a lot of my clients, they'll expose me to incredible artists that otherwise I'm, not feeding it in our Pandora. And at the same time, we'll expose them because they'll stop in, and at any given point, it's kind of like music bingo in there, whatever rotates. And I really love music. I cannot imagine functioning life or work or painting. I paint a lot without having that background.
Exactly. Another artist I just discovered, Katie Tunstall, I believe is her last name.
I have to put this. I'm going to grab my phone. Katie.
I've got it on my phone. Katie Tunstall, I believe.
I have not heard.
But she came out with an album.
Mr. Joe Martin has put me on to some incredible music.
She's Irish, and she came out with an album about 15 years ago. I can't remember the name of the song now.
What's the last name?
Tunstall, I believe. I'll have to show you when we get off here. Anyway, she's got kind of a sad story because she's really good. Her songs are really good, but she lost hearing in one ear and hasn't been able to sing since then. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, so she's had a couple albums out, and she's really good.
That's a real Mozart tragedy.
Yeah. Another really good one, and a friend of mine at work I discovered he was a fan of hers too, is Florence and the Machine.
Yes.
Who are really good, So that's the kind of music. And I still listen to the 70s, but I've got a lot of music in the 70s, which I thought was really a good time for music. but it's nice to kind of branch out. You know.
So, Kendrick Lamar or Drake?
I don't know who you're even talking
Okay,
about.
good.
Yet,
That's
so.
okay. There was a beef battle between Kendrick Lamar, U.S. rapper,
Okay.
and Drake, an import from Canada, or as I like to call it, Canada.
Canada, yeah.
And they were going at it all summer. And there was like Team Drake, Team Kendrick. I think Kendrick won the battle. And so I was like, wow, you might, I don't know, you might be, I think you would like Kendrick. So you actually might like Kendrick because he's the first rapper that got the Pulitzer Prize.
Oh.
Is it the Pulitzer Prize for writers? Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And for his lyrics. And so I think you might like it. You might like it.
Yeah. Give it a listen.
And the 70s favorite artists that you go to in the 70s?
There are so many. I mean, there really are. No, I can't even think of any off the top of my name. I like Journey. You know, the Beatles were always a favorite of mine. Rolling Stones were always a favorite. A lot of that's the 60s, though, that their music came from.
What was your first concert?
Chicago.
Oh, that's a cool concert.
Yeah,
first
went to
concert
Chicago. Yeah.
in Nebraska.
In Nebraska. Yeah. Another concert I went to that I really like. Another group I really like, America. And I saw them when I was in the Navy in San Diego. So they've always been a favorite of mine too.
Yeah.
So.
Concerts are so expensive.
Yes.
They're so expensive. I hear about some of the prices that people are paying to go see some of these artists, and I'm thinking, what do you do for a living? I mean,
Yeah.
Are you selling an organ, or seriously, what do people do for a living that they can afford to go to like Taylor Swift or a Beyonce concert? Because it's not just a ticket, but you have to fly there and you have to get a hotel and eat. Even if you're just eating like sunflower seeds at that point. But it's pretty incredible to me and they fill these arenas.
Yeah.
I'm just amazed that people can afford that.
My granddaughter Vivian in Prague and her mom Jess went to see Taylor Smith in, I can't remember where it was. It was somewhere around there in Central Europe. So they had a real good time.
When she was touring over there.
Yeah, when she was touring over there this summer. Yeah. So
U.S. artists are such a big hit everywhere, all over the world. To me, I'm just so I'm such a fan of anything Americana, especially older Americana, where even like the clothing and the cars, and I'm a big fan of how American culture is so influential. Positive, negative, I mean, that's another conversation too, because people talk about, the export of culture and how that changes societies. But I'm such a fan of, and maybe not even just a fan, but I'm just so intrigued by how culture trickles into other parts of the world and how people consume it. Like how Kiss, the band Kiss, is so huge in Tokyo. And even with something more localized, the Evel Knievel, and just how grand and the following of Evel Knievel is throughout even Asia and even in Tokyo. And I'm just amazed by that, because some of these very nostalgic, kind of niche cultural legends that you would think they're just right here in the inland and just like American and stay here, but people all over the world. And the power of music. When we lived still behind the Iron Curtain, it was contraband. You could not have like American jeans or Marlboro cigarettes, or even like you mentioned the Beatles. You couldn't have like Beatles music or anything, Michael Jackson or any of the movies, American movies, but they were everywhere. You could still get them. You could get them underground or in the black market. And people were such fanatics. It came with a risk.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the power of music. That's the power of culture, is that you can't stop it. You can't stop it.
It always amazed me because before my son lived in Prague, they lived in Bulgaria, in Sofia. And we went to visit them there, and I was surprised at, like, on the buses that went by, they were advertising Game of Thrones, which has just come out on HBO, but it was in English on the side of the bus. We go to Prague. I mean, there's McDonald's there, there's Starbucks there, there's all the stuff that you would see here. And it was, I don't want to say disappointing, because I wanted to experience the culture of those particular places. But you really couldn't, because there was a McDonald's and there was a Starbucks and there's, all this stuff that you would see around here, So it's kind of weird.
Yeah, it happens like that. You almost have to go now, like in the countryside or out in the outskirts, because every major city and every tourist city even, they almost have this like cookie cutter stamped.
Exactly. Yeah.
The same. It is true that I noticed that we just went back to Armenia, and they're a little bit more strict over there because, and Starbucks can't really, I don't think, survive over there because Armenians make really good coffee.
It's a whole different thing. Yeah.
It's a whole other kind of coffee.
Yeah.
But who knows? Maybe with the younger generation. But I was really surprised that there's like influences of, like, there was KFC, and I thought, why is there a KFC here? And then, a block away, there's like a monastery from the year 600 next to and then there's the KFC, and I'm just like, this is so weird. Seeing this merge of fast culture with ancient culture and fast food culture, and the fashion. I thought, wow, this just looks like I'm in almost like a simulation of Western influenced clothing and music, and which is so interesting to me. And even I've been to Czechoslovakia and another country that, after the fall of the Soviet Union could free up and really expand and show its identity and individualism. And I get disappointed, not the right word, but I do get disappointed whenever I travel and I see the same chains just there, and they're present, and they're now next to like cathedrals and the traditional markets, and they become almost like pillars, almost like they become like pillars of that society. And I don't know, we almost want to think that they stop, like the chains and the franchise kind of stop and don't export. But if it's demand, and that's the free market,
that's right.
And I do like to taste the variation, though. For example, like at the not the McDonald's, but at the KFCs, the chicken nuggets and the chicken is way different overseas than how it is at the KFC here on Blue Lakes. It's a whole other product. The fries are a whole other product, and it's just so different.
Well, when we were in Prague, we got a chance to get away from a lot of that, and there was some really good food. I really liked their goulash over there, and we experienced some different kinds of food over there. Some I liked, some I didn't.
And what took your son there?
They teach.
They teach
there. at an international school there. So, and they've taught in Bulgaria, and they taught in India, Germany, and now Czechoslovakia, or the Czech Republic. So.
And so that's how you get to travel. I thought maybe you had roots.
No. Well, yeah, my wife's family is originally from Poland. My family's originally from Germany. So. Years back.
Have you been to Germany?
Yeah, we went to Germany. Yeah. My son, he worked in a small town, She worked in Stuttgart. She taught at school in Stuttgart, my daughter-in-law, and my son taught in Weimar. I never could pronounce the name, but we've got to visit them at both places there. So,
what is your experience like when you are traveling, like when you're international, and what's your experience with seeing how their news is delivered, and how is that for you? Because a lot of it's in English too.
To be quite honest, we've been so busy, I never really had a chance to watch any of the newscasts when we're over there, and it's just, and sometimes it's nice to get away from it, if you know what I mean. It's just, sometimes you just got to kind of shut it off and get away from it for a while. Yeah. So, and that's kind of what I did when we travel over there. So.
Yeah. I really can understand that, because it's like when I will walk into stores and then I'll start rearranging and moving things in hangers and fixing their displays, and I'm thinking, why? It's like on autopilot.
Yeah,
your training and your experience like kicks in, and now you're in work mode.
Yeah,
that you can't really just.
I would always tell new reporters, and I would hire usually people right out of college, and they would always want to do a really good job, so they would be totally obsessed with the work they were doing. And I always made a point when I scheduled people to give them 2 days off in a row, because I felt that was important, that they have that time to themselves. But I told them, you have to, when you have your time off, you have your time off. You've got to leave your work at work, and your personal life is your personal life. And for a lot of people, it takes them a while to do that. But it's very important. You got to kind of walk away from it for a while. I said, if there's a problem, we'll get a hold of you. But you don't have to sit there and worry about it the whole time. So people need their space, and that's why I always thought it was important that everybody had at least 2 days off in a row, that they had 2 days that they could do whatever they wanted to do.
I imagine that's so hard to do with the shortages in, not just in broadcasting, but the shortages, I know, even for the news rooms, that people are either on 24-hour cycles, and I don't even know if they're getting days off, because even with the newspapers, I know that there's constantly just shortages.
Yeah.
Less and less people available.
Well, since the pandemic, it was really hard to find people. It really was, because a lot of people, didn't maybe want to do it, and found something else to do. I had a real struggle trying to find people, that actually wanted to come to Twin Falls, Idaho,
Why do you think that is? I know that a lot of
the bigger
places,
stations, with the shortage of people, people that I would usually hire were now getting offers from bigger stations where they can make more money. So it kind of dried up the talent pool. And it was hard for us to find people, So, but we found some good ones.
Yeah.
So.
I imagine after pandemic, there was a lot of anxiety on the news front and getting back into the community. That's something I noticed. I'm not a journalist. I'm not in the media space, but I did notice how a lot of the hostility turned towards media and journalists. And again, with my lived experience, I thought, whoa, this is really undemocratic and un-American. And I don't know if in your career you've had that experience ever before, or can compare it to a time ever before in America. I don't remember personally anything like that from living here.
No, I don't either. And it's very important. People need to realize that they need to have a free press. There needs to be a press out there, no matter what it is. It needs to be a free press. It can't be government or state-run media like you're used to back where you're from. So,
when does it though become so free press? I think free press, but when does it then become not free press? When they're consolidated, or if they're under a corporation. I know I've done a little research on just how many syndicate stations, and even with papers, how many of them end up being under very few corporations are owned by someone that, and at that point you do have an agenda or a vetting process. When does it stop being a free press?
I mean, I haven't worked for a company that demanded we do something. I mean, that hasn't happened to me. I've heard there are places out there that this is the agenda you will take on this particular issue, but I've never had to deal with that in any place that I've worked. So,
have you thought about? I know you're relaxing and you're retired and you're fishing, but have you thought about doing a podcast of your own?
Yeah, we have. My wife and I have talked about that. Yeah,
how exciting! Very cool. I hope you do.
Yeah.
I hope you do. I know that you have a lot of experience and you'll be able to draw guests, and also it'd be fun to do with your wife too. Has she ever done any radio or any?
No.
And have all 15 of the grandkids be
there you go.
be your guests. And I enjoy talking to, like with my son, when we have conversations, he comes up, he formulates, I enjoy talking to young people is what I was going to say. But with my son especially, and Anjali too, they come up with some of the most interesting and deep questions that I have to go ask Google because I don't know the answer, or I have to think about it. I say, can I think about that? Because I've never had anyone ask me something so profound. Mm-hmm. And I think there's so much we can learn from young people. My son wrote down a question and he said, make sure you ask, his question was, and you answered some of this because it was at what age you knew you wanted to go into the news business or be a broadcaster. And he wanted me to ask, what advice do you have for a young person who would today consider a career in the media with all that has changed in not only technology, but also in how media is and the culture of media and the news?
Well, obviously, I mean, technology is a big part of it. You need to have studies in journalism, but I wouldn't take journalism as a major if you're going to college. I mean, that would be your minor, but I would take, maybe even history as a major, because, I mean, what goes around comes around. History repeats itself. And it always amazed me to have young reporters in the newsroom. I'd have a book sitting on my desk from Charles Kuralt. I don't know if you know who that is.
I've heard of Charles
Kuralt. But he did a series on CBS called On the Road with Charles Kuralt, and it was really good. It was back in the day, and he'd just go to little towns and talk to people like that. And the reporters that I would hire would come in, and they wouldn't know who Charles Kuralt was, and it always kind of bothered me a little bit that, you're a journalist, but you don't know who this journalist is, So I would say to somebody that wants to get into the business, yeah, you should take a journalism course. I mean, that should be, but it shouldn't be a major. It should be a minor, and maybe take history or even business as a major, so you can know what's going on. So that way you can you can sell yourself a little bit. I know all about economics. I can tell you about this, or I know all about history. I can tell you about this.
I think.
But you have a little bit of background in journalism.
I think business is one of those that's really great advice. That's really great advice, and I think business is one of those that, in any career field you're going to go into, especially if you're going to be, you yourself are the product in a way, that you're able to understand how to present that, how to market that, how to negotiate that. Otherwise, you're just kind of following the lead instead of leading your own career.
Right. Everything's a business. I mean, everything's a business.
Everything's a business. Yeah. I joke around, but I'm not joking around, but one of the greatest business models in the United States is like church. Yeah. It's incredible.
Good point, yeah.
It really is. And I will often talk about like spirituality, but I'll say, spirituality plus business is how you get religion. I think it's incredible. Like some of these massive mega churches, and I'm thinking about it from a business perspective. And I'm like, this is a church, and they're not a taxable entity, and they have a stadium. Like, oh my goodness! And so, and I don't think just studying theology is how you get there. It is definitely business.
That's exactly right.
Did you study business?
No, did not.
You went to journalism school?
Yeah, I went to Kearney State College, which is now the University of Nebraska at Kearney, and then I went to a community college when I got out of the Navy. So,
what did you study after the Navy?
Just broadcasting, journalism, that stuff. So, yeah.
What are some of your favorite moments, or maybe not even favorite, because some of it maybe is negative, but what are some of your, I guess, moments that have stayed with you that when you're reporting them, they almost become like a part of your bones in a way? Those moments that are in real time lived by the rest of Americans, and you're delivering the news for the first time.
There are a bunch of them. When I was back in Nebraska, we had a huge outbreak of tornadoes, and we covered that. A reporter friend of mine and I went up there during the tornadoes. We won a lot of awards for that, and that always sticks to mind because we did a really good job covering that. I remember doing the news when the Berlin Wall fell. I remember that, and that sticks out in my mind. When John Lennon was killed, I remember reporting the news on that. 9/11, those types of things I'll always remember because I was there. I was able to report on that, from America, report on that to the local hometown state.
How does that feel? Like, I'm trying to think in real time, how does that feel for you? Like in real time, you are delivering this, but you're also living it.
Right.
And I know you're classically trained and learned as a journalist, and there's this professionalism. But how do you hold back the emotions? How do you actually do it?
9/11 was really hard. I mean, it was really hard. We would sit out there. I could catch myself tearing up a couple times. Especially when they'd have, I can't remember the instance right now, but there was some choir singing or something like that, and it just kind of really hit home, And the older you get, the more that stuff kind of affects you. When you're younger, you don't really think about it, but thinking back on it, like when the Berlin Wall fell, or the tornado thing, we were just all gung-ho, and that was, this is big news, and we're happy to report it and felt good about it afterwards. But I think 9/11 was the hardest thing for me as a reporter. So,
did you ever have a moment where you had a difficult time? Not so much like the emotional part. Did you ever have news where you just maybe didn't want to deliver that particular information, or I guess something that was counter to your personal values and beliefs, but you still have to report it?
Yeah, there are instances, but like I said at the outset of this, is you report what happened. You stay on the middle of the road. You don't try to let your beliefs bleed over into it, even though you may totally disagree with what you're reporting. This is what happened. You've just got to report that, and you don't see a lot of that anymore, especially on the cable news networks. I mean, they all have an agenda. Each one has a different agenda, and you get that pushed at you all the time. And you don't really see, I guess some of the major network news, they try to stay middle of the road, but they've all got, they've got a huge audience, so they've got to be something to everybody.
Yeah, I heard someone say, they used the term entertainment information, like information, but spelled with an E, and not so much as information, but entertainment nation, like that. And I thought about it, and it's very true, or it's very real that that's kind of what's been replacing the straight channels of getting that information. And for you also, as you're reporting and living all this in the community and in the country, you're also become a learner of a community, and you learn so much. I mean, all that's coming through you. So when you started out, specifically like in our community, when you first started out to almost 2.5 decades now later, what are some of your beliefs that have changed over time, or what are some of your, or even a different question is, what has changed in our community besides growth, but some of the news or the characteristics of our community? But the first question is, what are some of your beliefs that early on in your career that have changed?
Not very many, to be quite honest with you. Like I said at the beginning, I'm kind of old school, and most of my beliefs that I had 30 years ago, I still have right now.
And that's influenced your delivery, your work ethic, and approach. How have you seen the community changed?
Well, growth, obviously. It's still a small town. Twin Falls is still a small town, but it's got big town problems. I mean, there's a drug problem, there's a crime problem, but most communities are going to get that. But thinking back when I moved here 25 years ago, it's still Twin Falls. It's still the same as it was back then, in my opinion. So.
And you did mention I did notice there's more and more reporting on drug or crimes related to drugs, and that becomes more like a drug report. And early on, I don't remember it being as it would be a shock, and now it's not a shock. It's not a shock.
Yeah, and you're going to get that with the population growth. I mean, as the city expands, as the area expands, southern Idaho expands, you're going to have that because there's just more people, and it's an unfortunate thing, but it's nothing you can do anything about, really. As more people move in, you're going to have those issues. So.
How do you see, and this isn't just like a Twin Falls or community question, but how do you see you mentioned the changes in how people are accessing information, and how do you see the future of the role of AI in the news? And do you think AI could replace
do you remember the show Max Headroom? Do you remember that?
No.
Okay. Well,
I'm interested.
You'll have to look that up.
I'm putting it on my list.
Okay. It was a show on ABC where Max Headroom was a computer-generated anchor. Okay? And it was on for a couple seasons like that. And it was kind of an interesting show, well ahead of its time. But AI kind of worries me a little bit, and you can see that happening even now with fake AI images coming out, and I think that's going to be a problem. But what I like to hear is it seems to be that people are doing something about it. They are worried about the problems that AI could cause. I'm sure it would be a great tool. It's a great tool that people can use if it's used right, but that is kind of disconcerting, because I could see in the future where somebody would say, well, let's do a Max Headroom. Let's do that now. And I could see that happening.
Well, and not only from replacing journalists and anchors, but also generating, like you were saying, with a lot of the false images or false, even videos. And I could see it becoming a problem where AI not only would replace news, but be able to back it up with like photojournalism and evidence or data and so much more, because that is journalism, is digging deep and
Right.
and seeing the evidence, presenting the information, the numbers, and witnesses. But if AI can
Generate all
generate
that.
all of that,
No one would know.
and
Yeah.
if it can broadcast it or tap into a broadcast, I could see that being something that would disturb.
Could be a really big problem, and it's something that, like I said before, I'm glad they're addressing that now and trying to bring that to the public's attention, that this could be a problem, and we need to do something about it before it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
So,
I'm
yeah.
fascinated with AI, and at the
Me
same
too,
time, I'm really intrigued by it, and at the same time, I'm challenged by like how do you apply parameters and ethics to something that can write its own enhancements and code
Yeah.
and
Do its backup, do a whole backstory, So it's scary.
it
Yeah.
is. It's very interesting. It's very scary. And I picked up, there was a book that was, I don't know if you know this, but AI has published a series of poems.
No, I did not know
And
that.
it's called, I think it's called I Am Code or something like that. I'll look it up. But the poems begin, really, they kind of begin by, it's pulling like algorithm and patterns from human poems, and it's putting it together. And there's like the violet flowers in the meadow, da 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 da. And there's rhyme and there's structure, and it's really beautiful. But towards the end of the book, there's clearly AI is self-reflecting, or it's self-reflecting in the poetry, and it's also kind of threatening to replace humans, because humans are starting to interfere with its ability to express itself poetically.
Well, it's also involved in music too. I mean, they've run into that problem with AI creating music, and that does away with musicians, So it's an issue. It really is. So
I can see us not catching up to AI. I'm sorry to. I know that you said that maybe there's people working on it, but I just can't imagine how, because
it's moving very fast. Yeah,
it's moving faster than we are even capable of understanding, and at the same time, it could go incognito.
Yep, and you wouldn't know.
And we wouldn't know. And next thing, we are all captured and in an AI band and part of an AI simulation.
Yeah.
And, well, my imagination is going wild. Well, I wanted to also make sure and give you time to also share about, we talked about your family. We talked about your incredible legacy and history, but is there anything that you haven't yet done with your life and free time and creativity that you are still looking forward to doing?
Yeah, I mean, travel. I mean, I'm looking forward to doing a lot of traveling. I mean, I like going to. It's always been a thing in our family with my son living overseas. We've always wanted him to move back, but it does create an opportunity to go places that I've never been before. So I like doing that, I like spending time with the grandkids. I mean, they're, like you said, they come up with really interesting questions sometimes. Trying to explain my little 10-year-old grandchild about politics. She was asking about it the other day, and trying to explain that to her. I mean, it was just like, well, duh, where do I start?
Yeah.
And but she's really interested. She was really interested in it. And it's nice seeing that generation grow up, and to try to be an influence on them. So
I really appreciate having the time to have a conversation with you and
Well, thank
learn
you.
about all the beautiful music you listen to. And I wish you all the best. And not just for myself, but on behalf of our entire community, thank you for doing such a classical, ethical job at delivering us the news and keeping us informed. I really appreciated, at least myself, to grow up and consistently know that you were going to be on and we were going to get informed. So thank you for that.
Well, thanks for having me here.
Yeah. And I look forward to listening and watching yours and Bev's podcast.
Okay. Well, we'll let you know when it gets
Yeah.
started.
Thank you so much.
You betcha. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.